and we haven't. So next time you run to write to your congressman and complain about something, complain about the fact that we don't have any privacy laws. That'd be a great thing to complain about. Something else that came up today, I was listening to Homeowners Association, and they're trying to get something done with broadband. That's something else that you should write to your Congress people and say that, you know, Clallam County has really poor broadband. So be nice if you do something about that. Any other questions? Everybody's muted, so if you're asking questions, I can't hear you. Nobody has any questions. How can I have a question and answer unless I have questions? I had a question from somebody today. They wanted to know how to transfer things from their old phone to their new phone. And Apple right now, if you buy a new phone and you register it with Apple, you get unlimited storage in iCloud for 30 days. A new phone, a new computer, new iPad. And that's because they want to encourage you to shove everything up into iCloud on your old device and then suck it back down on your new device, because it's the easiest way to get everything on your new device without screwing it up. And so I'm encouraging her to do that. She is 84, and she said, I lost you when you said shove it up to iCloud. So tomorrow I'm going to go visit her, because my explanation made no sense to her. But a lot of people are getting new devices, and that's a common problem they have. The other issue they have is what happens if their bandwidth is quite poor. And if their bandwidth is quite poor, they should make dinner for somebody who's got good bandwidth and go over and visit them, and during dinner they can sync their phone up. But that's that, or take a trip to Alderwood Mall. Alderwood Mall and Tacoma Mall, depending upon whether or not you like ferries, are the two closest Apple stores. And in the Apple store, they'll do it for you. So you can go wander around the mall and have lunch or shop, and they'll upgrade your phone and transfer everything. But yeah, shoving it up to iCloud is the fastest, easiest way. Well, it's not necessarily the fastest, it's the easiest and most reliable way of getting your stuff off of your old device onto your new device. Any questions?
I'd like to ask you to speculate about why it is that Apple has delayed updating the iMac. I mean, what I'm reading now is that they probably won't update it until the next generation of chip, the M3, is available, and that won't be until about this time next year, apparently.
Well, the Apple's point of view is that the iMac is kind of their baseline machine, and the M1 iMac really is quite spiffy. And if you want something with a larger screen right now, the easiest way to do that is to get something like the Mac Mini and go out and buy a big screen from somebody and just plug it in. Having it as an integrated design, a lot of people thought that was a good idea, but then they found out that the screen wasn't big enough, or they wanted more screens or something like that, and it gets more complicated. I think a lot of it also has to do with the price of screens has actually gone up. With TV screens, you see a lot of TV screens now that you can get 75-inch TVs for what you used to be able to get a 40-inch screen for. But a lot of those 75-inch TVs, if you look at them electronically, they're just a bunch of smaller screens that are ganged together to create a lot of space. Whereas the computer screens don't work that way, because the refresh rate needs to be higher. And it's really expensive to make the high-end screens. I have a Studio Display, which is Apple's display, their high-end display. And I had an external monitor that was basically the same size in terms of pixels. And it died, but it was also 7, 8 years old. And I wanted to go out and get a new one. And to get this one that I have is from Asus, which is at the low end of the market. The Asus screen costs almost as much as an Apple Studio display. And by reputation, the Apple Studio display is kind of a Cadillac, and it's, 3 to 4 times as much as anybody else. No, if you go out there and get something else with the same specs, it's going to be about the same as the Apple device. Only it won't have Thunderbolt 4 ports on the back and a bunch of other things that the Apple it doesn't have a security processor, it doesn't have speakers, so on and so forth. All these things that the Apple Studio display has, these third-party ones don't, and yet they're pretty much the same price. And that a lot of that has to do with the fabrication of screens that large. It's expensive. And if they brought out a 27-inch iMac, it would probably be more expensive than what people think it would be. So right now, if you want something that's really, really fast and you want a bigger screen, the cheapest way to go is to get a Mac Mini, M2 Mac Mini, and get a big screen. The M2 Mac Mini is as fast as the original Mac Studio for about 70% of the tasks out there. So it's a relatively inexpensive way to get a really powerful machine. But in terms of why, I've heard speculations, but I do know that there's a worldwide shortage of certain types of. Are we frozen? We appear to be frozen.
Without moving.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's why we appear to be frozen, because we were frozen. There's right now a worldwide shortage of high-end chips. And part of that has to do with the fact that Apple and a lot of other manufacturers are stepping back from using China as a sole source supplier for a lot of stuff. And the other problem they have is that what they were using when they weren't using China, they were using Taiwan. And right now, because of security issues concerning Taiwan, a lot of people are hesitant to invest in huge factories. Intel says that to make a new high-end CPU chip making plant is a minimum of $4 billion to as much as $32 billion for one plant. And that's a lot of money, especially for private enterprise. So I think Apple's dealing with supply chain issues as much as anything else. Something that people should know is that Cook, the current CEO of Apple, that's how he got into Apple. He is a supply chain engineer, and that's his specialty. So I'm reasonably confident that he pays a lot of attention to that. But again, Apple doesn't explain anything until after it's done, so I'm not really sure. Other questions?
I have one, Lawrence.
Yes.
My husband has an old Apple iMac that's labeled obsolete. Mine is now labeled vintage. So we're both getting ready to probably upgrade to a new iMacs. I went online and started comparing, and I had all your notes in front of me as far as storage and speed and all that. But there were two questions I didn't know how to answer: 2 ports or 4 ports? And the other question was 7-core CPU or 8-core CPU?
Okay, the easiest one is the 7-core and 8-core CPU. For standard normal things that most normal people will do, you're not going to notice a difference between 7-core and 8-core. What you will notice sometimes are things that are related to that. Sometimes the 7-core CPUs are limited in terms of the amount of memory, like the low end. If you go into Costco always has the lowest end Apple devices. And because they can't be upgraded, if you buy it, if you walk out of the store with that, there's no way to boost it. And the 7-core CPUs are quite often tied to 8 gigabytes of RAM. And 8 gigabytes of RAM is okay for most things, but keep in mind that you can't ever upgrade the RAM in the new Apple Silicon chips. And so in our case, Kathleen, when she got her laptop, and I got a laptop and so on and so forth, our minimum standard is 16 gigabytes. 16 gigabytes might be more than you need, but the fact is you won't run into any stumbling blocks. There's a way to find out if you'll ever need that much, but it's kind of technical, and it involves looking to see if your computer in Activity Monitor to ever see it does a memory page. And what a memory page is, that means when your computer runs out of memory, so it starts using the hard drive to as memory. And the hard drive is thousands of times slower than your memory. So if you have to use the hard drive, it'll slow things down. But ignore that, because most people will never figure out how to get that to work. My recommendation is to go with 16 gigs. And at that point, I don't think the 7-core ones offer that as an option. The number of ports is more of an issue. The MacBook Airs, for example, come with 2 USB-C ports. And if you plug in the power into one, that leaves you with 1 for everything else. My solution for that is this thing. This is a dongle. This one is for different kinds of media cards. I can put in a compact flash card, an SD video card, a micro SD video card, I can't remember what the Sony proprietary cards are called. But anyway, I had to buy this because somebody gave me a compact flash card. Compact flash cards are actually not very compact. They're fairly large. They were the first removable memory cards that cameras had. And I hadn't seen one in like 10 years. So I got out my compact flash reader and I stuck their card into it and wouldn't read it. And that's because their card was 8 gigabytes and my old compact flash reader went up to 256 megs. So it just couldn't handle it. So I bought a new one. And this thing cost me like 15 bucks. A more complicated one. And of course, I don't happen to have one handy. And I don't really want to, I don't really want to unplug this, but I will. This is what I have. And I hope I didn't unplug anything that I really need. This is this one cost me like 30 bucks, and it's got 3 USB ports on the back of it. It's got 2 USB-C ports on the front of it. It's got an Ethernet cable on it. It's got an SD video card and a micro SD video card. It's got an HDMI card for video, all on this one plug-in device. And it cost me like 30 bucks. So with this $30 device, I've greatly expanded the number of ports, and it just uses 1 port on the Mac. So the question of 4 ports or 8 ports really isn't that big a deal. And it depends upon what you want to plug in. Like if you have a printer, most printers now, you can print to them wirelessly. You don't need to plug something in. You probably don't even have a scanner. If you do, it's connected to the printer. You probably just will find that you use less things than you did on older machines. If you get an iMac or you get a MacBook, it comes with a camera, so you don't need an external camera. It has a microphone, so you don't need that. It just depends upon what it is that you do. To give you a contrast, if you get a Mac Mini, which is a really powerful machine, and you just heard me recommending them, a Mac Mini does not have a screen, does not have a keyboard, does not have a mouse, does not have a microphone, does not have a camera. So on a Mac Mini, getting a dongle device like this, so you can plug things into it, and they're called USB-C hubs, what they're called. You go into Google and go into Amazon, look for USB-C hubs, and you'll see lots of them. The brand that I recommend for these things above others is called Anker, A-N-K-E-R. And that's because they just have a good reputation for quality. You'll see a lot of USB-C hubs by names that you can't even pronounce. And a lot of those are just small Chinese companies that make a few thousand of them. They sell them, they go bankrupt, and then some other firm comes up and does the same thing. But the Anchor has a good reputation. And again, they're not that expensive. The only downside to using all your ports using one of these portable hubs is that if you have a laptop and you take it somewhere and you forget your hub, then you may not be able to connect up to with what you thought you would. The MacBook Pros have 4 ports. They're not that much different in terms of the speed from the MacBook Airs. So that's when it comes to ports, usually you're talking about the laptops. They have 4 instead of 2, but in practical terms, most people, they're going to use 2. They're not really going to use that many more. But the RAM though is an issue. So 16 gigs of memory, I think, is an absolute minimum. And again, because you can't plug anything else into it, I would look into a terabyte drive. The ones at Costco are usually only half a terabyte. And you can fill that with movies and photographs and such fairly quickly. The nice thing about these is it's easy to go out and get storage. This is a USB-C terabyte drive, and you just plug it in to one of those free ports, and you've added a terabyte of storage to your Mac. There is a specific drive that I've been recommending to people. It's a 4 terabyte USB-C drive made by Toshiba that I use for my Time Machine backup. So I just plug it into my machine. I say, that's your Time Machine backup. That means it's the only thing it's going to do, but it'll just back up to that, and I just ignore it. Once the computer knows that's what it's backing up to, it just backs up. And that thing is like $108 or something like that. That one's really cheap. But I wouldn't recommend that for data, and that is because it's $108 because it's inexpensive, but it's also fairly slow. For data, I would get something that's a little bit faster. It's probably really fast compared to what you're using right now, but it's still slow compared to the current standard. But for backup, I don't care. I just want it backed up. Did I give you too much information or just enough?
No, I think it's good. The other thing I had written down last time was to get 1 or 2 terabytes, but I noticed looking at the iMac, they weren't offering 2 terabytes.
Actually they do. There's a version of I need to bring up a browser window. And of course, it's being difficult.
Maybe the choices I made earlier in the process limited it to 1 terabyte, but I couldn't find an option with 2 terabytes.
Yeah, and because I'm streaming right now, it's not letting me see the internet very quickly. That's one of the problems with if you're hosting a stream, you use up a lot of bandwidth. But
I can look again.
Oh, let me try one more way to get there, and it's still very slow. Okay, Mac. They changed the design, twits. Yeah, you can get a iMac with 2 terabytes, and I'm pretty sure you can get the laptops with 2 terabytes.
Okay, I'll have to look. Thank you.
And it's about time for the meeting. So one last question before we turn to the meeting. Anybody have a question? Oops. No, I did not make a sign-in sheet. Kathleen just asked me, do you have a sign-in sheet? Of course, I forgot to make a sign-in sheet.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's Carol. I had a hard time signing in, going to the link. And I hit go with Zoom and everything, but it didn't seem to want to go through.
You should have just been able to click on the link and it take you there.
No, and then it said allow with Zoom, and then it said, and it just spinned, and so I went back and stopped that and went again.
Yeah, that's probably something local with your machine. Just as an FYI to people, before you get on any kind of Zoom meeting or any kind of FaceTime meeting or something, there are 2 things you should do. Well, with Zoom, you should check to make sure you have the current version. And that's why when I send out the announcements, I usually tell you what the current version is. And the second thing you should do is probably reboot your machine. A lot of people throughout the day, they launch all kinds of things. And especially when you're streaming, those other things that are open are using the same kind of resources that Zoom uses. Zoom is not the world's best written application. And so if you reboot your machine, that forces everything to start over again. It's like a brand new world. And then you can start your Zoom meeting and it'll probably give you fewer problems. So
Hey, thank you.
this one woman, when I was watching, she launched a Zoom on her laptop. She launched this Zoom meeting. I say, wait, what was that? She had 19 applications open. It was a laptop, and when she brought it into the church, which is where I saw her, she just shut down her laptop at home, but she didn't turn it off. She just shut the lid, brought it in. So all these things that she had opened, they'd been open for probably a week or more. So just as an FYI, if you reboot the machine, it should respond more quickly.
Thank you.
Anything from our president? Do we have our president? I don't see her.
But I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, welcome, everybody. I don't see anybody new. So I actually don't, well, I have a question. I wanted to know how the meeting went. I'm sorry, unfortunately, I missed it. We had friends that were moving and then another set of friends that were up here on vacation that was in the makes for a while. But the one at the church, how was the turnout, or do you know how many people?
Kathleen, did we have a dozen?
13.
We had 13 people. And they were a mixture of Mac and Windows, in as much as 2 people had Windows machines, the rest of them were Macs. But I covered both, and several people afterwards said that they were surprised that my presentation talking about Windows and my presentation talking about Mac weren't that different. And that's because when it comes to elementary troubleshooting, they aren't, the individual techniques are different, but the general principles on what you're checking aren't that different. But everyone seemed to be happy. I did have, as I expected, a lot of interesting questions afterwards from people that had problems for a long time, and they were surprised that things that they were doing on a daily basis were actually causing the problems. Like this one woman, she had a wrist rest, and the wrist rest was pushing against the option key on her computer. So when if it pushes against the option key, when you type things in, the Mac changes what you're typing. And she said she'll stop doing that because she didn't know that would happen. But I thought it went well.
Was the majority from outside of our user group?
I think about a little bit more than half were people on the smug mailing list, but there were several people that a couple of people were from that church, and a couple of people. One person came from Port Townsend, one person came from Port Angeles, and I didn't really poll them. There might have been more, but at least those two people identified them as being from Port Townsend or Port Angeles. So I thought it went well.
Oh, that's,
And
but one more thing before I forget, I came by this afternoon and I dropped the check off in your mailbox. I don't know what time you guys normally get the mail, but I didn't ring the doorbell. I just popped it in your mailbox.
okay, yeah, we'll take a look.
So with that, I will turn it over to my mom and let her go over the numbers, since that deduction, you got reimbursed. Let's
Okay.
that way.
Okay, well, we didn't get any deposits in this month or the last couple of months. We had that expense, the check that Sabrina dropped off at your place, Lawrence, so that it was $163.26 expense for the Zoom subscription for another year. Yeah, and that brings the balance down now to $1,960.64.
One comment people had about the meeting at the church is that they thought the screens in the church were up too high and it hurt their neck. So I was thinking of that because their audio visual in there is not really designed for what we were doing, and yeah, so they backed up and then they said they were too far away and they couldn't see the screen, but you know, it's one or the other. One woman said that next time she was going to bring in her lawn chair because it allowed her to recline, but I don't know if she was serious or not. Anything else before I start?
No?
No, we're
Okay.
good.
I'm going to do three things. I'm going to have a quick review of what Apple introduced. I'm going to show you once again something that I just really think is super cool and it's free. And the third thing is I'm going to talk about Apple TV. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And I'm going to share that screen. And the first thing I'm going to show you is this thing. This I've told you about last month, but it's really quite cool. Let's make that thing go away. This is something called Little Snitch Mini. You can get it from the Apple Mac store, and it's free. And what it allows you to do is to see everything that you have open at any given time. And if you click on it, it'll tell you what it talks to. And I was using this a couple days ago because I was talking to an FBI agent, and he wanted me to use this special super secure thing to talk to him. And I had this open and I'd forgotten that it was open. And I said, "Oh, you're talking to me from the data center in Virginia." And he freaked out because that was not something he wanted to talk about. But Little Snitch Mini, it puts up a map and it tells you everything you have open, and it shows you where they're connected to, which it should be enlightening. You'd be surprised sometimes what your applications are talking to. Okay, now is there any way for me to move this? Oh, yes, there is. Zoom puts all this stuff up that makes it harder for me to see. I have a presentation tonight, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly and then try and get on with the demo. Okay, I think that's it. Yes. One of the things that Apple introduced, well, at the Worldwide Developer Conference, Apple introduced a bunch of technologies, but the developer conference, since these are software developers, most of the time is spent talking about software. But they had hardware developments this year that they were talked about last year. They didn't do that last year, it was all software. And one of the first ones was that the next version of Apple TV, if you have an Apple TV and you have a Mac and you have an iPhone, it will allow you to use your iPhone as a camera for your TV so you can have FaceTime calls and see on your TV. So this is a demonstration of a FaceTime call where you can see the Apple TV there in the corner and the iPhone, and I went too far. And you can have a FaceTime call. My daughter is in England and we have FaceTime calls with her, and we're usually kind of crammed into using an iPad or something like that. But with this, we could sit back in chairs and watch her on the TV, and she could see us using the iPhone. One of the things that they had is when they put the iPhone next to the TV, they put it on this stand. So as an unannounced thing, Apple apparently has a stand that you can stick your iPhone on to act as a prop to hold your phone as a camera. But the other thing it does is that at nighttime, it acts as a nightstand so that you can look up and it displays in horizontally across in big bold letters. It shows the time, so you can use it as a night clock. But this may not mean too much to you, but Kathleen and I are both excited about this.
How do you do that?
How do you do that?
Yeah.
You there's going to be a FaceTime app on your TV, and so you fire up FaceTime and ask what camera you're going to use. You put your iPhone there and it syncs with that, and then your iPhone streams the video to the people in England or wherever they happen to be. And my daughter's iPhone or iPad or whatever she's using gets streamed to my TV using the Apple TV. So it takes three things. It takes a TV, takes an Apple TV, which is that black device that you see there. Speaking of which, Kathleen, could you bring me one of the Apple TVs in the bedroom?
Yeah.
The Apple TV is that black device in the corner, and it keeps on trying to switch the screen on me. And then it takes an iPhone. So you're using the iPhone as the camera, the Apple TV is the interface device, and your TV. So
There should be something on the Apple TV that shows this FaceTime thing.
The Apple TV does not currently support FaceTime, but that's going to be out in the next version of Apple TV, which is coming out this fall.
Oh, okay.
It's an app that runs on the Apple TV, that little black box in the left corner. The next thing that they had that was interesting is that right now on the iPhone, there is a health app. And the health app takes information that's collected by your Apple Watch and your phone, and it displays to you, like it tells you how many hours you were in bed and all kinds of. I only just need that. I don't need this. I don't want that. Sure. The health app on the phone is kind of cramped in terms of what it does. Well, the next version of the iPad OS will have the health app on the iPad. So you have a much larger screen to see a whole bunch of stuff, and Apple's adding different things that it can do, like more information on respirations and hearts and a bunch of other things. And that's coming to the iPad. And for me, that's a huge plus because I've wanted this for some time. I was trying to, I have arrhythmia and I've had it my entire life, so it's no great thing. The Apple Watch can take an EKG, and I wanted to show it to the my cardiologist. And the only way I could show it was on my iPhone, which is kind of pathetic. But with the new with having the health app on the iPad, that'll make it much more fun, easier to do. Mac OS Sonoma is the new version of the Apple operating system, and they didn't talk too much about this. They just showed some features. Right now, you can have widgets on the Mac what's the current operating system? Whatever I'm currently using, Ventura. You can have widgets on the screen. Well, they're expanding that greatly, so it's going to act more like the iPad. And the widgets will allow better they're going to add new widgets that'll just be things that stick up on the screen, so you don't have to go look to see what time it is or what the time zones are. They just stay up there. But it also is going to allow better integration between your iPhone and iPad and your Mac, and a bunch of stuff that's coming out on this. But the integration features are going to be what most people notice. It's much easier to move things back and forth and do some things on your iPhone and see the results on your Mac or iPad. On the iPad, they're doing a lot with widgets as well, including widgets on the lock screen. For example, there's an Earth clock, and it not only tells you the time, but it also shows you where the sun is. It assumes that that it's positioned right over where you are. So at 9:41 in the, I guess this would be in the morning, it would look like this. And it shows you that. But notice in particular that the rotating Earth is right over the clock. So it's doing all kinds of just cool things in terms of graphics in order to get it there. And you can have widgets on your a lock screen as well. So you can just look at your iPad without opening it up and see what the time is in various time zones, or what the temperature or the air quality index and so on and so forth is. So think of this as more with Sonoma and iPad OS. They're working intensely on integration and convenience aspects of the operating system. They introduced two new Macs. One is the Mac Studio with an M2 chip. It's got an M2 Max and an M2 Ultra chip. The original iPad, the Mac Studios had an M1 Ultra chip. The M2 Ultra is essentially two M2 chips that are stuck together. So it's a very powerful chip. The Mac Pro is the tall one on the right, and that is basically the same case as the existing Mac Pro, but it's going to have Apple Silicon chip inside, and you can put up to 192 gigabytes of RAM in it. And it's got, I don't remember if it was 6 or 7 slots. So you can use it in the sound world. They put in sound cards in there, so you can have multiple channels of sound, or you can have multiple channels of video, all streaming into it at the same time. The Mac Studio is not that, the low end price is like $2,000. The low end price for the Mac Pro is basically, it costs as much as your Ferrari. It's not cheap, but for the recording industry and people crunching codes and so on and so forth, it's probably just going to be hot stuff. The M2 itself, I have some figures up here. You can put up 192 gigabytes worth of RAM. By comparison, my first computer had 16K of RAM, so, a bit more. It's got a 32-core neural engine, and neural engines are useful for things like speech processing and rendering things and cracking codes and so on and so forth. 800 gigabytes a second of memory bandwidth. That means moving memory from one part of the chip to the other part of the chip. It can do it really fast. It'll display up to 6 Apple Studio displays at once on that Mac Studio. So if you can plug 6 of those Mac Studio devices, the Apple Studio displays, you can plug 6 of them in it at one time. And it's got 134 billion transistors, which I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember the original transistor radios. The original Sony transistor radio that I saw was, I was living in California at the time, and I was probably in first grade. And there was this thing about the, about the size of a brick, and it had 2 transistors in it. So this one chip, which is smaller than a Post-it, this one chip has 134 billion chips on it. Really interesting thing. Watch OS 10, they talk mostly about health things, different metrics that it can that it can pick up in terms of your health and movement and respiration and heartbeat and so on and so forth. For most people, what they're really going to notice are the new watch faces, and the Snoopy watch face tickled me greatly. At one point, Woodstock slides down the minute hand and bounces off of Snoopy's head, which is pointless and doesn't mean anything, but I thought it was, Kathleen and I both giggled. We thought that was cool. In terms of what it does, it also tells time, but most of what they spent the time on was talking about the health benefits of the Apple Watch. And Kathleen and I use it specifically for that purpose. They introduced a new 15-inch MacBook Air. And the big thing about it is that it's got a bigger screen. And because it's physically larger, it also has a longer battery life than the existing MacBook Air. What they spent the most amount of time, it was on the Vision Pro. These are a set of goggles that you put on to put yourself in a virtual environment. Whereas Meta talks about the virtual environment from playing games, and a lot of other people do this too. They use it basically for gaming. Apple has done something very different, and Kathleen and I were fascinated and watched it twice because we wanted to catch up on some of the nuances. It creates a virtual the environment around you, so you can use your computer, so you can use your phone, so you can integrate with data, as well as showing you things like virtual couches and so on and so forth. But we were intrigued with it for people who were mobility impaired or had cognitive issues. I had shoulder surgery once, and I tried to type one-handed on a computer. And that was very difficult. With the Vision Pro, you can type by just moving your fingers. You don't actually have to type. You don't need a keyboard. So you can type, you can talk to it, you can give it verbal commands. It watches your eyes. So if your eyes move in one direction, it'll move to a different part of the virtual spreadsheet or whatever you're using. We were really, really fascinated with it. The part that we were not so wild about was the price, which is, it starts at $3,500. What they didn't tell you that was interesting, though, is that you can see someone's eyes through the screen. If you look at Vision's Meta or a lot of the other, all of the other ones, they're opaque. You just got this brick in front of someone's face and you can't see their eyes. Well, you can see the person's eyes through this mask. And we thought, wow, how did they do that? You're not really seeing the person's eyes. There are cameras inside that display what the eyes look like. So if they're looking at you or they blink, you can see it through the goggles, but they really are opaque. There's essentially a screen in front that shows you what their eyes are looking at and what their eyes are doing. So it's a fascinating piece of technology, and Kathleen and I were mostly interested in terms of people like disabled vets or people who had cognitive or physical limitations, because we see just a wealth of uses for it, especially if it wasn't priced $3,500. But You can go on Apple sites and they have some videos showing you how it works. And I encourage you to go do that. The iOS 17 has a bunch of new features, but the couple that are going to be the most interesting to people is you can set up photo cards for people. So for example, on the left one, say my daughter calls me. When she calls me, rather than just have a phone number, it'll display a card. So that card can be a picture of her or picture of her house or whatever it is that tells me something about my daughter. You can also set up memojis that are based upon photographs. A memoji is kind of an emoji, only it moves. So you can take a photograph of a cat and that can be your memoji that represents you or somebody. And on the right is, I get, my phone number is 240 area code, which is which is Maryland. I didn't change it when I moved here. And when I get calls from 240 or any of the other Washington, D.C. or Maryland area codes, I just don't pay any attention to them because it's probably spam. If I don't answer the call, the new phone will give me a transcript if they start talking. So it'll show up on the screen, and at that point, I can decide whether or not I accept it. You might remember back in the good old days when we had answering machines in the house, you would have an incoming call, you didn't know who it was, you'd ignore it, and then they start talking, you realize it was your nephew or something, and you go dash to the answering machine. Well, this is essentially the modern day equivalent of that. Instead of talking to them, they start talking and it gives you a transcript, and at that point you want to listen to them, you press the little green accept button and you can talk to them. And I think this sounds like a splendid idea. Kathleen jokes that I have a phone so that I won't talk to people, and this way I might actually talk to some more people. And they talk about a bunch of things. The Apple keynote addresses normally are 2 hours. This one is 2 hours and 8 minutes, and it really was quite something. And if nothing else, I encourage you to go look at the videos they have of the Vision Pro to see how it works, because I really do think they've come up with something very, very different. I noticed that the day before Apple announced it, Meta came up with a new set of goggles from Meta for gaming, and those are only $500, but they also are owned and operated by Facebook and probably worth less than $500, but I don't have a great opinion of Facebook. Okay, Apple TV. It was been requested several times that I talk about Apple TV. Apple TV is 3 different things. It is a device, it is a service, and it is an app. And I'm going to talk first about the device. I couldn't find screenshots that I like, so I took a bunch of photographs of our TV, the one that Kathleen's looking at right now. So this is off of our TV, and if it doesn't look like a professional photograph, this is just something I took very quickly at around midnight. So when you bring up Apple TV, it says you have different choices. Just sticking with the Apple TV part, you can watch now something, and down at the bottom you see thumbnails of things that I've recently been watching, or things that we own. And I just bought a 6-pack of Mission Impossible movies, so it's showing Mission Impossible, and we've been watching DC Stargirl, so that's on the menu there. So the watch now is you can watch these things, or you can go over the next tab, which is Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus is the service. So on the Apple TV, you can watch Apple TV Plus. And for that, it will show movies that are on Apple TV, such as 300, which has nothing to do with Apple, but Apple currently is showing it. Or you can watch various series that are on TV or movies that were made for Apple TV. You can watch sports, which I skipped over entirely because I don't watch sports on it. You can go into the Apple TV store and buy or rent movies, or you can go into, I must have, you can go into your own library and it shows you libraries of things that you already own. So these are digital movies that we purchased or were given to us or whatever. So that's the Apple TV service running on the Apple TV device. If you go beyond, you look into this, Ted Lasso is on Apple TV Plus. It's a series that's in its 3rd season and probably the last season. It was for the last 3 years, it's the highest rated streaming series on TV. It's about a football coach from Kansas who is hired to run an English football team. And so it's filled with a whole bunch of, in English football is we call soccer. And it's filled with a whole bunch of culture clashes in terms of food and language and customs and so on and so forth. I should warn you that the language is a little bit colorful because the English on TV, if you watch Masterpiece Theater, you think that everybody speaks in the Queen's English. And really their language is much more blue than it is in the United States. So the English people in Ted Lasso tend to say very colorful things, but it's still quite funny. We greatly enjoyed it. It also has original movies. This is from the movie Greyhound, which is a Tom Hanks movie about a destroyer captain fighting the Nazis in the Atlantic during World War II. It was supposed to be released in theaters, but the pandemic came about and Apple bought the movie and has it on Apple TV. It is extremely well done, and I was impressed with the set design because it looks like they're really fighting this battle from this destroyer, but the destroyer itself was scrapped a long time ago. So I was curious how they did it, and they actually built a huge set to mimic the bridge, and a lot of it was done with computers. So really impressed with that. Apple also produced this movie, which is on the introduction of Tetris into the United States. And it is hilariously funny. And I was really shocked when I was looking it up. It's really pretty much true. There are some things that they made up like dialogue, but the events are just bizarre beyond belief. And now there's a movie about it. Really like that. And they even showed the original Tetris, which was character-based. It wasn't even graphics-based. So it's a really interesting movie. Coda, which was also produced by Apple. It was the first streaming service that Apple ever produced, and it won 3 Academy Awards. It was also one of the very first feature films ever to have deaf sign language as a major portion of the dialogue. So a large portion of the movie is done in American sign language. Really well done. If you are a science fiction fan, they also have started a series based upon Isaac Asimov's novel Foundation, which has been long thought to be unfilmable because Foundation takes place over hundreds of years and advanced civilization in the far future, but Apple's doing it. And the 2nd season starts again, I think, in July. We also have on our Apple TV an app called YouTube TV that's run by Google. And with YouTube TV, we get our local news off of our Apple TV using the YouTube app. And the YouTube app, the ABC, NBC, CBS, these are all Seattle stations. So we get Seattle news, we get the local news, anything that they're showing in Seattle that we can't actually see unless we had cable. We don't need cable. We can use the YouTube app for that. And if you look at this is a screenshot of Apple TV. There are large icons, and you can tell it's for Amazon Prime and YouTube TV and Apple TV and Disney Plus and so on and so forth. And some of these things come with it, like you see the joystick, the red joystick icon in the 3rd row, that's for Apple Arcade. You can see the little bullet, that's the activity monitor, the same thing that you have on your Apple Watch and your iPhone. So tracking your activity, and you can do exercises and exercise videos and so on and so forth. And you'll see here in the upper left that there's a little gear icon. That's the settings program for Apple TV. It looks a lot like the settings icon that you have on your iMac or your iPad, and works pretty much the same way. And on the third row down on the right side, you'll see that blue icon with the, looks like an A. That's for the Apple TV app store, where you go and buy Apple TV apps. So it's, the interface is very similar. I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second to show you something physical, if I can ever find my stop. Okay, this is the remote that you use for Apple TV. The circle up here at the top, and you can use it to go in various sundry directions, and it's got a mute and up and down and volume control and so on and so forth. And this is what an Apple TV looks like. It's just a black brick, and it's actually fairly heavy. This is an older model. It's got an HDMI port on the back so that you can plug your TV into it, and it's got an Ethernet jack. There are two models out now. One doesn't have an Ethernet jack and one does. The advantage of an Ethernet jack, well, if it doesn't have an Ethernet jack, then it works entirely over Wi-Fi. The problem with TV over Wi-Fi, especially if you're using, there are people, gamers, like to use the Apple TV for games, is that Wi-Fi has a built-in latency that most people wouldn't notice. You know, just things are split second off, but with gamers, they get upset with that. And with you don't have Wi-Fi latency if you plug it into Ethernet. So the Ethernet model currently costs a little bit more than the Wi-Fi only version, but that's what an Apple TV is. And you plug your TV into it, and you run it through your phone, and this is how we get TV. So we're on Wave, but we do not subscribe to Wave's TV services because they're really expensive. We use the YouTube TV. The other advantage in having this brick to get your TV, when you use Wave for your TV service, Wave sells your TV habits, everything that you watch, it sells them to TV companies. It sells them to Disney and CBS and so on and so forth. Everything that goes to your Apple TV is encrypted, so nobody gets it. It's all encrypted, so Wave has no idea what I'm doing with my.
Have you noticed that your remote for your Apple TV is extremely sensitive?
The original ones were that used to infuriate me. The new one isn't that bad.
So mine looks just like the one that you have there, and it's a 4K version. So I think it's probably the newest one.
It's probably the same one.
But it has a setting that you can. Yeah, that's exactly the same one. It has a setting in there that you can go in and turn off the sensitivity. It has either tactile type of things where you have to actually push things to get them to work, or we were having troubles with even just getting our finger close to it, and it was sensitive enough that it would change things on us. So, but you can turn that off and make it much less aggravating.
I did not know that. I'm going to investigate that.
Yeah, it's in the settings for Apple TV. It's wonderful.
Ron, where would that be, in which setting?
Well, I'm not where I can see my unit, but if you Google it, it'll tell you. Why is my Apple TV remote so sensitive or something like that, and it'll tell you how to fix it.
Yeah, if you go into this settings app here, it's got a whole part on the remote, and I just never paid attention to it. So
yeah, it's just made a maddening thing just wonderful.
Lawrence, everything that you're describing is based off of having the Apple TV, you know, the box, the unit itself.
yes.
Does all this apply like on our LG? I have Apple TV, just the app. And then I can do the same things. Does all this apply the same way, or are you specifically talking?
No, the Apple TV that is on your LG TV is the service, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about. The
Oh, okay.
Apple TV physical brick, I add apps to the Apple TV and everything goes through the Apple TV. On your LG, it goes through the LG and it goes through Wave, and they sell your data, among other things. It's quite a bit different than the service, which is what I'm going to show next.
Yeah, I have an older TV where we have the actual brick Apple TV hooked up, but then the newer TV came with it, so then the older TV got the brick one.
Okay, well, the brick one actually does things that the one that comes with your TV does not.
Okay.
Because the TV has the service. This is the Apple TV service, and for example, the Watch Now and so on and so forth. It looks a lot like it did on the Apple TV, except that you can't do things like YouTube TV. It doesn't offer YouTube TV. You can't add other apps to the service. So this service that you get, you subscribe to it. If you buy a new iPhone, sometimes Verizon throws it in for free and things like that. But this is a service. So these are things that you can, Apple TV is an app on your Mac. If you go look for it, you can find it, unless your operating system's too old. But it's a service. And the Apple TV service works pretty much the same way on a Mac as it does on an iPad, as it does on an iPhone. Obviously, the big difference is on a Mac, you've got a much bigger screen than you do on your iPad or iPhone. But under the Apple TV Plus tab, you can go through, and they've got various sundry programs that you can scroll up and down and sideways. One of the things that we're very fond of right now is a new series called Silo, which is a science fiction series about 10,000 people live in this huge underground silo, and none of them know why, because they have a governance that basically says that history started when they moved into the silo. So nobody has any idea what it's like on the outside, except they have this one external camera that shows that people who go outside die. So it's not a warm, fuzzy series, but it's very, very well done. It's based upon a science fiction book of the same name. But these are programs that you can get through Apple TV Plus, and they range from series, like these are all series, or they can be movies, such as the Tom Hanks ones that I talked to you about. And if you click on it, it'll give you a little preview of it. Well, since I don't know if it'll actually play this for me, because nope, it's not going to play it. It's not going to play it. It's playing it on our TV, but it's not playing it on the Zoom screen. Oh well, but anyway, it's really well done. And but it's got a bunch of different movies. 300 came out long before the Apple TV existed, but apparently that's showing that as well. And all kinds of there's just an awful lot of content. Kathleen and I were noting that something that came up on TV had to do with somebody was doing a report on the data that people were buying based upon people's TV habits. And Kathleen and I were thinking about it. Other than the nightly news, we don't really watch that much broadcast TV. Most of the stuff we watch is streaming. And since it comes through Apple TV, they really aren't getting anything on us. Then they also have an agreement with Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, so you can watch sports on the Apple TV, including things that you cannot get from your local one. You can buy different movies and series and so on and so forth, or rent them. And then the library. You might have noticed that in the newer versions of the Mac operating system, there is no iTunes anymore. iTunes used to have not only music, but it also had podcasts, and it had movies, and it had books, and so on and so forth. And they've split all those things out. So there's now an iBooks, and now there's a podcast application, and so on and so forth. But your video that you used to have on your machine is now on the Apple TV. So if you wondered where that video went, you can go look under your Apple TV app. And so these are things that I've recently added, and these are movies, and these are TV shows, none of which I added, so I have no idea where these things came from. Home videos. I used to take my regular DVDs and I used to rip them, and I'd watch them on our TV. And because those are not purchased videos, it all considers those home movies. So Battlestar Galactica, got a whole set of DVDs of that, and now it considers as home movies. And it's broken out by different types of genres. That's what the service is. So there's a difference between the application on the Mac, which is called Apple TV, the service, which is called Apple TV Plus, and the physical device. And it's kind of confusing because Apple calls all of them Apple TV. And I've been talking for quite a bit. So do I have any questions?
I have a Roku TV that streams only. And
Yes.
I have Apple TV on it. And I can watch Ted Lasso and some of the things they have there.
Yes, but you see,
But-
that is the service.
That
And-
is the service. It is not Apple TV per se.
Yes.
Is that the app, do you call it?
Yes, it's the same as the app that's on your Mac or on your iPhone or iPad. That's what the Roku has. It's not the same. It's not this box that encrypts your in and out, and you can't add other applications. I didn't show you what some of the other applications are, but there are workout applications. There's a free application that you can watch penguins at a zoo that I'm very fond of because I'm very fond of penguins. There are hundreds of apps for the physical device, and some of them are free and some of them are not. There's one app that does nothing but the Earth rotates, and as the Earth rotates, you can watch as the Terminator line moves in and things turn into darkness. So if you watched it for 24 hours, you watch a complete rotation. Why you'd want that on your TV, I don't know, but it was free, so I got it.
The screensavers on it are pretty special.
The screensavers are phenomenal.
Yes.
What Apple did was they went out with some 4K or possibly 8K, I'm not sure exactly, cameras mounted on stabilized cameras on stabilized helicopters, and their overhead views of rural China or the Great Wall or downtown London or the Alps or a whole bunch of ones on with Iceland and Greenland, and just fantastic shots. And it's Kathleen and I were joking that the city shots seem to be focused on cities that have flagship Apple stores. So there's London and there's New York and there's San Francisco, but it's really just a joke. They were looking for just things that are iconic things, and you can set the physical device so that the screensaver is on for hours on end. Normally, mine's set so that if we haven't used it in 15 minutes, it turns itself off. But my nephew, who was in the Air Force, and he was in a severe accident, and he had to be discharged from the Air Force. has very, very limited vision. And he likes the Apple TV because he's got like an 80-inch TV. He likes the Apple TV because he can see it. And he likes the screensavers. So when he's having parties over his house, we were just at my grandniece's graduation party, he'll just have screensavers play one after the other for hours on end. No sound or anything, just the screensaver. And you see these slowly moving vistas of San Francisco or New York or ice flows. And they've recently added shots from outer space and from under the ocean. So it's really quite cool.
You just wish they would put on there what you're looking at, you know, what is this location?
If you just gently tap the circle,
Yeah.
don't actually click it, just gently tap it. It'll briefly show up where it is.
Oh, cool. I'll try that.
Yeah. It was one of the first things that I figured out. I said, there's got to be a way to show the location, and that's the way to do it. We really like the Apple TV. This is an older one that we had for my, actually, this is our original one. My mother was using it, and it gave her a great deal more control over her TV than she would have with a regular remote. And she liked that. Although sometimes she managed to do things with it that I'd never figured out how. She had it set on assistive technologies one. She wanted closed captioning, and it was reading the closed captioning, but it was reading it really, really, really fast. Neither one of us could really follow what it was saying. So she did discover things that I haven't been able to duplicate, but it gave her a great deal more control.
Lawrence,
Yes.
when you're subscribed to the through YouTube for your local and nationwide news,
Yes.
can you go back and watch something? My whole thing is we only use the DVR. We never
Yes.
watch live because we don't want to watch commercials, or it's at a time that is inconvenient for us to watch it. So is that possible with the YouTube that you're using?
Yes. In fact, they call it an unlimited DVR because you can say record everything, and it will. But as an example, it's not working right now because of the writer's strike. But I never watch the Tonight Show or the Late Show or any of those things on because they're too late. But I can record them, and you record them just by tapping them, and it says, yes, we'll record this. And you can record the entire series. So you only have to do that once, and it'll record it every day. And you can say record only originals or record originals and repeats. And when they say it's unlimited storage, from YouTube's perspective, they're just storing a file, and they're storing a file on their server, and other people have probably stored that file too. So it's not taking up any space on your Apple TV or on your device at all. It's just a pointer. So you can go back and pick off any day you want and watch them in the wrong order and watch them repeatedly.
Can you fast forward through the commercials?
It depends upon what it is that's recording. If it's something like, for example, if you record something from as an example, Star Trek, we were watching it on TV, but there is a CBS or whoever has it, Paramount, whoever it is, they have an app, and it sees that you are watching it, and it switches you to the app. And if you're using the app, they force you to watch commercials.
So you're better off to stay within Apple and not go?
It depends. If it's not available, it depends upon how it is. The streaming was working really nice until Paramount and Columbia and so on and so forth decided they were going to make money off of it. And now it's very confused.
Yeah, because like on certain things, like on, I think it's on Hulu. On my subscription, I added of course, it's an extra cost, but to have no commercials, because I absolutely hate commercials.
Yes.
So you pay, I don't know, $4.99 extra for what, on top of whatever your monthly is. So I was wondering if the YouTube, the news part of what you're doing, if there's an option, because that's my biggest pet peeve and I want it DVR'd.
Yeah, if you're watching the news and a commercial comes up, but you've recorded it, you can just skip right over the commercial.
Okay.
Well, you can forward over the commercial. And the way you forward on it, if you tap on this circle at the top, it'll go forward or backward 10 seconds at a time, or you can just hold it down and it'll scroll through it.
I
So-
definitely need to do what Ron did there and figure out the sensitivity. I mean, you can hardly even put it in your hand and that sucker goes all over the place. And
Yep,
then,
that's the problem we were having. Yep.
Yeah,
It's
well,
Yeah,
all gone now.
the older ones that had the black
see,
control,
I have the older one. Mine's not that new one that you have.
the ones with the black control, I used to say really bad things about it. But
Yeah, we've had
this one's
words
not-
with it
this
and it
one's
wasn't
not bad.
pretty.
The other thing you can do with Apple TV is that you can
Oh, I have the remote on my phone for that exact reason.
yes, I'm going to
Yeah.
switch back to sharing mode so that people can see this. No, that's not how to do it. I'm not going to do it that way. Stop. Go away. I'm gonna move it closer to the camera, and it went to sleep. So that is an Apple TV remote on my phone. And if you have the current model of the Apple of the iPhone operating system, it's on there already. If you go into Control Center, you can add a whole bunch of different things to your phone, and including flashlights, Apple TV remote, magnifier, code scanner, screen recorder, voice memo, a whole bunch of stuff that you can add. And so I added the remote so that I can control. We have a frequent issue that we'll watch the news during dinner, and I'll leave the remote closer to the TV. And we're sitting at the dinner table and we want to do something. So just take out your phone and control the TV without getting it from dinner. So it's really handy. I can see you're really impressed with the fact that I can control my TV with my phone, but it really is.
But
quite cool.
I was just looking at it. So, but the TV itself has to be on because it says which television does it want.
Well, believe it or not, that's not true anymore. If you have something like a HomePod, I'm not going to demonstrate it right now, but there's a trigger word to use to talk to the HomePod. That may or may not be Siri, but I will tell the HomePod to turn on the TV, and it'll turn on the TV.
Well, you're just that sophisticated.
And I'll stop it. I was trying to avoid that, but my watch is trying to tell me how to do this. Once the TV is on, you still can't launch anything, but I found out that I can say launch YouTube TV, and it'll launch YouTube TV. Won't change channels, but at least I've got YouTube TV up. So I can do that just with my voice.
Well, then the remote works on the phone.
Then the remote works on the phone.
It'll find it. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite cool. So it's a little bit confusing, but there are 3 different Apple TVs: the device, the service, and the app. And the app on your Roku or on your Mac or on your iPad or your iPhone does some things, and if you subscribe to the service, it does more things. But if you have this box, it does a lot more stuff. So it's a little bit confusing. Any other questions? Doesn't have to be about Apple TV. It can be about something else we were talking about. How many of you are going to go out and buy a $11,000 Mac Pro with 192 gigabytes of RAM.
We'll leave that to you.
And then you can teach us.
Yeah, yeah.
The Mac Pro comes in two different versions. One is a regular one that, you know, goes upright, but then they also have one that's rack mount. So you can buy a whole bunch of them. And I know somebody who put in an order for 1,000 of those. They crack diplomatic codes for a living. So they're using them to do high-end cryptography. But I don't have that need, so my needs are more modest. Any other questions?
How do you like your Apple Studio display?
Well, I like the Apple Studio display. The sound for something like this, the sound is fine. When I'm watching a movie, it doesn't have it's not as doesn't sound as full as listening to them on HomePods or something like that. But that's about the only place that's really not top notch. I'm a photographer, and I really like the color fidelity. It's much more accurate than any other display I've ever had. It's got a hub on the back, so I can plug other things into it. I really like it a lot. I was a little bit surprised though when my old monitor died, and I wanted to get something that had comparable specs, because if you're looking at really accurate color on one screen, and then you turn to this other screen and the colors are different, it's really annoying. And to get something that had decent specs costs as much as the Apple Studio, and yet it doesn't have the security chip inside. It doesn't have the USB-C ports on the back. It's just it's just not nearly as capable, and yet the price is comparable. So that took me by surprise. I was not expecting that. So it's even a better bargain, I guess, than I thought it was. It's not cheap, but it's I'm really impressed with it. No other questions? I have a question then. What are we going to do next month?
How about a session on how to use Apple Maps, especially how to use, say, Forest Service maps with Apple Maps? So you can use GPS, for example, when you're hiking.
That's a good question. I don't even know if I know the answer to that. I have some friends who are really fascinated with this one app, and I can't remember the name of it, that it's a service, so it costs money.
There's All Trails for one, and there's a GAIA or something like that. It's the other one.
I think All Trails is the one they were using, but it's specifically designed so you can use your iPhone when you're nowhere near cell towers, and it uses the GPS in it to update the map of where you're going. And it's based upon some fairly high definition trail maps, and using US Forest Service and US Park Service databases, but it costs money, and I've never used it. I've reached the age of my life that if I'm not near a road, I probably don't want to be there. So if my bicycle can't go there, I probably shouldn't go there. Other ideas? I'm not opposed to doing the Apple Maps thing. For one thing, I've been shocked at how improved Apple Maps is. We used to use Google Maps for everything, and I'm just really impressed with the progress Apple has made with Apple Maps. And it's getting to the point now that Google mimics some of the Apple Maps feature. If you are riding a bike, for example, and you're telling it where you want to go, your watch will tap to tell you whether or not you're supposed to turn left or right. And that worked also when you were in the car. It would tap to tell you to turn left or right. And now Google does that too, which is new. It took me by surprise when Google started doing that. So Google's learning from Apple. So they've greatly improved it. And if you're in a city, particularly San Francisco or New York, Apple Maps just is phenomenal. When you come out of the subway, it'll tell you which direction to turn to. When you're in the subway and you're spiraling upward, you lose track of which way is north, which way is south, and Apple Maps will tell you to turn that way, and Google will kind of just strand you on the street and tell you to figure it out. So I've been impressed with what they've done.
I'm
For a while that it was Apple Maps was so bad they used Google as well.
When we came cross country in 2018, we used Google Maps. We did not use Apple Maps because as soon as we hit the deserts in the Western United States, we weren't going to subject ourselves to that. We might have ended up in Mexico or Canada. So we skipped that. When we moved out here, we went the southern route because they were having terrific snowstorms in the north. So we went through Mississippi and Texas and Arizona, and once you're in West Texas, from there to California, wireless signals are really kind of hard to come by, but Google Maps would just use GPS and send us on our way, and Apple Maps would get confused.
I'm interested in tracing ships in the straits. Is there an app that's good for that?
Yes.
There are, and there are also apps that'll tell you that when large planes are flying overhead, it'll tell you what those planes are and where they're going. But there are apps for tracking ships, and there are apps for tracking planes. When the Coast Guard does one of their rescue flights, those aren't logged, so it won't help you with that. But for most things, it'll tell you what the plane is overhead, or you could look at a ship and say, what is that? And assuming that your sense of direction is halfway decent, you can look at this app and it'll tell you what that ship is.
Carol, I would download the app called Marine Traffic.
Yep.
It's so cool. We use it on a nightly basis because we see the cruise ships going in and out, or at night when they're coming back in. And so we want to know which one. We just earlier we're using it, trying to see the cruise ships that went by yesterday, how far north they had gotten to Alaska. And then I was looking at in Alaska, the ones that are heading back that'll be coming through here, usually at about 2 or 3 in the morning, they come back through the strait. You can pay for the app, and then it's like, I think it's a monthly subscription. I personally didn't find it necessary because I didn't need all the information, but it definitely, you can try it and then see if you want to know way more details about the specific ship, or the speeds, how there's certain things that are locked on that you can't get without subscription. But like I said, I'm okay with just seeing the pictures and where it left and where its destination is.
Yeah, I live on Dungeness Bay.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'd like to have that. I don't care where. I mean, I've been on Alaskan cruise and I didn't see the lighthouse because we stopped at Victoria, and then you were too far away then.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but we find the marine traffic super interesting.
Thank you.
Usually, yeah, by the time I think they leave in Seattle at 5, and at 7 o'clock they're in front of our house.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you can save favorite boats too, boat names or their call signs or whatever it is. And then you can ask where it is right now, like Polar Star or, one of those, and it'll show you where it is and instantly and what they're up to.
Yeah, I did that, but I didn't keep paying. But that's part of the paid subscription, that you can follow your favorite cruise ships or whatever it is that you're in, nautical thing you're into.
Any other suggestions as to what we do next month? Okay, well, if you come up with something, email me and we'll see what we can do. Also, there's a possibility I might have jury duty next month that could screw us up. This courts have been way backed up, so the chance that they won't select me for something is probably fairly small. But it might be, a case of shoplifting, or it could be something big. Have no idea. But we shall find out.
Did you
Any-
say that you didn't have a sign-in sheet?
No, I forgot. Sorry.
I don't think he really is.
Well, it is nice for keeping track, so it would have been helpful if I'd remembered.
I'm sure Chris wrote it all down.
Yeah, I think she was writing.
I'm a member of, I'm an officer of another user group in the DC area, and on Saturday we had Rob Pecoraro, who was a Washington Post columnist who wrote about computers and such. And he asked if they had a sign-in sheet, and there was this deathly silence because he goes to these conferences, worldwide conferences, where he talks about personal electronics. So appliance conferences and computer conferences and security conferences, and they give him these bags full of stuff, quite often quite useless, sometimes quite useful. And he was giving away this stuff, and he wanted to use the sign-in sheet for a drawing. And he said, do you have a sign-in sheet? Deathly silence, 80 people in the room, no sign-in sheet. So he gave the stuff away anyway, but it was, oh well, such is life. Anything else?
Something we might consider is everybody bringing their favorite app that they like or something and sharing it with the group. I
would be fascinated with that. If you can, that's a good idea. That talk about your favorite iPhone app or iPad app, or just app on your computer. I find that what I use my computer for today is so radically different of what I used it for in 1977 that it's not even funny. I personally wrote my first word processor. I bought my computer so I could turn it into a magic typewriter. Nobody had written a word processor for my machine, so I wrote my own. When I was at NOAA, they didn't have, you couldn't get web servers software. It didn't exist. So I wrote the web server software for my agency, and that software was our first website. So the kinds of things that I used to do with computers is very different than what I do today. So I'd be very curious what your favorite apps are. So we should definitely do that.
That's something that we could do every month. I mean, just does anybody have their favorite app or something like that?
Yep.
Give a 2-minute spiel on it or something.
Or if you got something new that you just think is super cool, then yeah, that sounds like an excellent idea. It doesn't have, you don't have to listen to me every month.
We enjoy it though.
Well, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.